I didn't understand his pairing until I really like listened to Folsom Prison.
Yeah, yeah,
Like it's easy to listen to it like two or three times and not really listen.
right. You hear what he's saying, and you're like, oh, oh,
Okay, some context. And my first context and where I want to start off is that
mm-hmm,
the guy that goes to jail at the end of Children's Story,
mm-hmm,
you could say this is his story after Children's Story. Folsom Prison Blues is.
yeah,
Like the stories could kind of be interwoven together, where the story starts with Children's Story,
mm-hmm,
but in Folsom Prison Blues, the transition from the end of Children's Story to the beginning of Folsom Blues is startling and pretty seamless, actually, on a
mm-hmm,
musical level in
yeah,
terms of the writing.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so today, obviously, as Coop has pointed out, we're doing Slick Rick's Children's Story and Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues,
Mhm.
and they're both, I guess we call them both classics of their genre too, right? I mean, the Folsom Prison song was written in 1953 and released in 55, and Slick Rick was what, late 80s, right?
88,
Yeah.
89.
And so they're both classics of, not like the very, very beginning, but like classics ish of their genres, among many other things.
You just answered my first question was when did he write this song?
Yeah. He was a contemporary of Elvis, actually. Like, I mean, at least at this, like working at the same time, except he lasted longer, both his life and his musical career.
Juxtapose him to Elvis momentarily. That's fascinating.
Um, I mean, they both released music on Sun, like the Sun Studios, Sun Recordings.
Correct.
They were both Southerners, obviously. Elvis, I don't, was Elvis from Memphis? I don't know. I mean, I know he lived in Memphis as an adult, but I don't remember where he was born. Johnny Cash is a farm boy, Arkansas. Um, so it's um he was born, Cash was born in, I think, the late 20s, I believe. Don't hold me to that. So he would have like grown up through the Great Depression too.
Mm-hmm.
And their their antecedent, like their musical history and the music they would have grown up with, was probably very similar. I mean, like Southern gospel church music, old country music like Hank Williams kind of stuff, and then getting touched by the beginnings of blues. Not the beginnings of blues. The beginnings of blues were in the 20s and 30s too, but like the blues changing into rock and roll, changing into whatever. Like and they were both really compelling performers too. Um, and they both had drug problems. They both had, I mean, they had all kinds of similarities as people. Johnny Cash, generally speaking, I mean, we'll have to speak more to this later, but seems to be held in higher regard in the wider culture, in as opposed to Elvis too. Um, he was a
That's what I want.
defender of the little man and of the outsider and the outlaw and all of that kind of thing too. So he has that reputation. He would go, that it didn't happen until after, the song was released. This was in the 60s, but he recorded whole albums, like live albums, in prisons, and released them in the 60s. One of them in Folsom Prison, actually. And
I think,
and you can hear him on the thing, like swearing and like cussing at the guards. And like he was on the side of the prisoner, so to speak, as a performer, for sure.
well, I think at least how you're explaining to me, it's like you have the corporate music industry's champ, who is Elvis, and then you have the people's champ, who is Johnny
Yeah.
Cash.
I mean, and Cash is, and you call Elvis a rock and roll singer, right? I mean, like as far as his history goes, and you call Johnny Cash a country singer. But I mean, you heard it. You said were listening to Cash this morning. Like the music, especially the older stuff, is not that dissimilar from each other. I mean, most of that, there were a lot of overlaps. Rock and roll, country, blues. I mean, all of those things kind of smashed together in different ways, and then you ended up with things like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and
There
however
is
they mixed together.
there is something that is more obviously country, blues, folkish,
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Cash, as opposed to Elvis. But there's something funky about Johnny Cash's stuff too, and
Mm-hmm.
funky in a country way too, like the licks, the
Yeah.
melody. that he's using. They're kind of funky. Like
Yeah.
they appear to be
They're not typical. No.
okay. So that's not typical.
No.
That's why I was going to ask you, like when he's recording this stuff, because you know, like the Sun recordings when he was with Sun Records, those are the recordings he's most known for, correct?
I guess. I mean, I don't know when. I don't know enough to know like when he changed
Right,
studios and
right,
stuff. He recorded for several different ones. So
right. But it appears to me that he's like one of those people that it's like helped kind of burgeon the fusion
mhm.
of like rock and roll, you
Yeah.
know, and
He's one of the dudes that's respected across those lines, like in
right,
ways that many people are not.
right. Like I don't think he's just looked at as a country singer. You get
No.
what I'm saying?
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So which song do you want to start with?
I mean, I think given what you said at the very beginning, it makes sense to start with Slick Rick's song because it if they like segue into each other, then in a storytelling kind of way, I think it makes sense to do it in that order. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, that's what it is. You know, there's something. There's something kind of churchy about Johnny Cash. That's what I mean when
Hmm.
I say funky. There's some
Yeah,
like there's some
without
gospel
question.
influence in there too, wouldn't you
Hmm.
say?
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So it's like it's got that funky soulful feel to it too. So it's like, well, it's kind of country hillbilly, but it's kind of gospel funky.
Yeah. No, he has gospel albums too, like he recorded. So,
Totally that he has the voice for it.
oh, without question. Yeah.
Okay. The children's story. This is one of those songs that you can honestly say is if somebody said, "Well, this is the greatest rap song ever," you couldn't like. There's no necessarily argue against it. Like
Okay.
you can argue other songs, but you can't argue that this song is in the conversation, and it's arguably the best verse ever too.
Okay.
It's one of those true. Like Slick Rick is one of our all-time great rappers.
Okay.
The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick, which is one of hip hop's seminal albums and one of its first true classic rap
Hmm.
albums from end to end. But even with all that said, this song is like one of the most special songs ever, if not the most special song in rap history. It is everything that you want in a hip hop record.
Okay.
It is insightful and
Is
has a
that?
street narrative. All right.
Hmm.
But it also has a message.
It does.
But it also has a wonderful beat.
Yeah, it does.
The rhyming is top notch.
Hmm.
The entertainment level is priceless, although the story is thought provoking, insightful, saddening, and is a message being directed. He's wildly entertaining and lyrical through all of that. Now, how many people on a song where you're delivering a message and telling a street narrative and are providing the details about it to make the story come together is happening over a beat this good where you're being entertained on this level?
Hmm. That's
And
that's like a big and Nas kind of level. I mean, it's that kind of. They're the other ones that do that too.
how about this? This is the type of record that made them aspire to make the type of records that they've made.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Like this is one of those records, you know. He does very special things on here that are subtle.
Hmm.
You know, one of the things, and this is what I mean about the entertainment level being high. On a part of the verse, he says, "Ran up the stairs up to the top floor, opened up the door. Yeah, guess who we saw? Who? Dave, the dope fiend shooting dope who don't know the meaning of water nor soap. He said, I need bullets. Hurry up, run. The dope fiend bought back a machine and shot a spanking shotgun. Like he's telling you a real story, but he's
Hmm.
making it funny. And he's
Yeah.
making it Dave, the dope fiend shooting dope who don't know the meaning of water nor soap. Like he's still giving
It's
you
funny. Yeah.
he's giving
But
you
it's
the
also like when you actually think about what he's saying, you're like, oh, I mean, because
right.
you have a drug addict living in the top of an abandoned building. Like this is not a
The
very
guy,
who doesn't have that. I mean, obviously, the implication is not that he just chooses not to take a bath. The implication is that he doesn't have access to right water and
right.
stuff. Right.
Or the fact, or it's just alluding to the fact that maybe he hasn't bathed in days, so there's an odor
Hmm.
or a stench that
Right.
comes up to see him. It's
Hmm.
a whole scenery, it's a whole imagery of it, and the fact that he can take that bleak and dire moment and make it entertaining and funny. Like
Hmm.
think about it, it's actually funny, but it's like when you think about what's going on, the
It's not a
the,
funny
the
story at all.
hitting the stories running from the police right now when this is happening.
Hmm.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? For dire circumstances, and he's using the dope thing to express the dire circumstances. Like, look what he has to resort to while on the run from the police to like try to get him out of the situation.
Right.
So it's also the explanation and kind of giving you that I don't know what we would call this in writing. It's not it's the fluff that makes up the article.
Okay.
You know how you like, you have your theme, you have your characters, but you have to have like the words and the build up and the things that piece it together. I think you laud Toni Morrison the most for like putting things together over here and over there and over there and over there that make the center complete.
Right.
That's what he's doing with these moments on these
He's
records. He's
filling in the
taking,
scene. Sure. He's adding details.
yeah, he's filling in all of these scenes to get you to that conclusion. And and from the way the story is going, well, you're so entertained that you forget that the story is bleak.
Yeah.
The beat's so good. He's so entertaining.
And he's telling it to a bunch of kids too. Like it's like I mean, it's set I guess the trope or the setup is that like the kids are asking him to tell a story and he's telling them like a bedtime story, right? I mean,
well,
that's
I mean,
the
I
setup.
mean, listen to how he ends his rhyme. This ain't funny, so don't you dare laugh. Just another case about the wrong path, straight and narrow, or your soul gets cast.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes from telling you this whole street narrative, and he literally ends it on a biblical overtone. It's
Yep.
one of the most brilliant moments in hip hop history. He's flawless on this record. If you told me this was the greatest verse of all time, I couldn't argue with you. It gives me chills talking about the verse.
Mm-hmm.
It's brilliant. He's masterful, like on a level that very few people have been masterful on one record.
Okay. Like
Yeah.
this was one of the ones on, I mean, my personal history with this or with whatever is like I don't know that I'd ever heard this before, or maybe I had heard like in passing like a long time ago,
Probably
but
more
never
from
like paid attention to it. Like I knew Slick Rick's name obviously, but I didn't like associate this with him and like say, oh, this is the kind of person he is. So, or not the person, the kind of songwriter I guess he is. Um, so his name I guess had penetrated the wider culture even when we were in high school, but like I didn't know anything about him really. um the things that jumped out when I first started listening to this is that, I mean, initially I didn't get it. Like, I mean, for in the same kind of way you were talking about not really getting the comparison between the two to start with, like, because this is one of the ones you suggested this song, and I was like trying to find one that matched with it,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, it didn't like really. As another one of those things, just like you're saying, it didn't really hit me until I like sat down and paid attention to what he was saying. I was like, oh, oh, because I mean, his voice is very atypical it's not a Chuck D kind of voice. Um, it's a very good voice and it's a very good storytelling voice, but it's not Chuck D KRS-One. It's not like that.
Okay, so this is what I mean about the pull off of this record. So you spoke to the voice. Well, the voice is one of rap's best voices,
Mm-hmm.
but distinctly and sincerely different than all the other voices
It
that
is
are down
different.
deep booming voices. And so he does things to offset that. His in does a lot of dual time rapping
Okay.
where he uses the vocal, like he uses what his voice can't, like those guys vocally, because of how heavy their voice is, they can't easily transition and train their voice to do dual time voices the way he can. It's one of the things that makes him on their level as an MC for his
Okay.
era. A lot of his records,
Can you give me an example of doing that? Like what dual time means?
You remember DMX on Stop Getting Greedy?
No. I mean, I know DMX obviously, but like,
Remember Give Me the Loot by Biggie? It's when one rap, that's Biggie on using both voices.
okay.
Slick Rick's the originator of that.
So where they're like talking to each other, going back and forth. Okay.
Yes, but
Okay. Yeah. I got it.
like are you familiar with Slick Rick's song Mona Lisa?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's him.
Okay.
That's back and forth with himself.
Okay. Cool.
There's Slick Rick the ruler and there's MC Ricky D. You know what I'm saying? So he has a dual personality. So he does dual voices. So that's what I'm saying.
I got you.
So he's stacking his voice and using the lightness of his voice to his advantage by doing that.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I noticed when I first listened to it is that there's not a hook to it, really. I mean, it's just it's just a story. It's just a story. I mean, you can say the knock 'em out Rick at the end is, but like it's not really. I mean, that's not the way you would think of as a hook
And
working.
that part of the song is classic. Even that part, the knock them out the
Hmm.
box, Rick. Knock them out, Rick. Knock them out the box, Rick. Like DJs are famous for, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Taking,
They're looping it. Yeah, sure.
yeah, it's notorious. The song is notorious in hip hop culture. Um, and you have to look at how he approaches it. He approaches it formally the way a writer would. Once
Hmm.
upon a time, not long ago, when people wore pajamas and life, so when laws were stern, injustice stood, and people were behaving like they all too good. Like he's almost like presenting the story to you
Hmm.
formally. There was a
Yeah,
little boy who was misled by another little boy. This is what he said. This is where he changes his voice.
he changes
You
it. Yep.
to make some cash while we're old folks and we're making a dash. They did the job. Money came with ease, but one couldn't stop. It's like he had a disease. He robbed another and another. If you listen to him, he's in the background going, stick him, stick him, stick him, stick him up, stick him up. That's what I mean when I'm saying Slick
Okay.
Rick's entertaining. He's doing stuff on the record that other cats aren't doing on their records. Like he's doing his own ad libs and they're
It's
funny.
theatrical almost.
Yes, he's setting a whole scene. This is hip hop's best story. How about this? This is a single. It's probably more classic than any one song Nas has released as a single. Andrew.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like Nas doesn't have a song that's bigger than this one song. Like he has songs that are better, but not bigger.
Right.
This is one of rap's biggest songs. You remember This Is How We Do It from Montel Jordan. This is where they took it from.
Oh,
Yes, this is the beat.
huh. I do know
Uh-huh.
that song for sure. That was like that is right in the heart of high school.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's the children's story beat.
Huh.
Dun-dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's well known. The verse is flawless. I mean, when he talks about grabbing the pregnant lady, like he's explaining like dire circumstances,
Yeah.
like throughout dope fiend, the pregnant lady, the sticking up of old people.
Hmm.
He literally, but one couldn't stop. It's like he had a disease. You know what I mean? He's
Yep.
speaking to mental health. You know,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot of ways to go with this record. You know, I mean, this is one of those records that it's like, where do you want to go with it? What do your notes look like?
Um, I'm gonna pull some of this stuff together.
Okay.
Um, that you were just saying. I mean, she starts with "Once Upon a Time Not Long Ago," and first of all, as a sidebar, isn't there a Jay-Z song or some other song that says something like "Myself with a strong arm"? Like does "Once Upon a Time not so long ago"?
Not any problems.
Okay, that does that. Okay, so
Yeah.
I couldn't place where I knew it, but I knew it from somewhere. We'll have to do a whole nother episode about 99 Problems or about Jay because we haven't really talked about him yet either. Um, but that's one of the things that I love about hip hop music, and that I'm learning more about the more I talk to you is how connected it is, like how much people reference each other's work,
Mm-hmm.
and in a not in a stealing way, but like in a
Reverend.
I'm honoring you like
Yeah.
by
Reverend.
taking a thing that you did and turning it a little bit and using it in a different way.
Slick Rick is the most borrowed MC of all time. Like he is the owner of the most sampled record in hip hop history, which is Lottie Dottie.
Okay.
Um, Children's Story is actually up there, and
Hmm.
so is the show. The show Lottie Dottie, Children's Story
Hmm.
are three, I think, of the 20 biggest like reused hip hop songs on some sort of level in history. Lottie Dottie being number one. And so on that level alone, he
Hmm.
is the most imitated rapper ever. That's what I mean. Like he is the guy, he is your favorite rapper's favorite rapper for real.
Yeah.
Like this is like I've told people this. It's like, oh, well, people say Nas only has a picture of one rapper hanging in his house. You know who it is? Slick Rick.
Yeah.
Right. He's everybody's favorite rapper's favorite rapper. Like, think about this. Jay-Z and Nas borrowed from him at the peak of their beef. The
Right.
blueprint starts off with a record called The Ruler's Back.
Hmm.
Andrew, The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick, the first record on The Greatest Adventures, the second record on The Greatest Adventures on Slick Rick, it's called The Ruler's Back.
Hmm.
Like, literally. So when you're hearing Jay come in on the blueprint, he's taken from Slick Rick.
Right. Okay.
Nas on Stillmatic on Destroy and Rebuild, where he's dissing Jay and Prodigy and Cormega and Nature, uses a Slick Rick impersonated British style accent voice through the whole song. So you have to understand that for the people that people think are the two greatest MCs of all time,
Yeah.
well, when they were in their prime, they borrowed from that man. What does that say about how great that man is?
He's the OG, right? He's the one that everybody takes, right?
Yes,
And that's another connection between him and Cash too, because everybody takes from him too. Like he's one of those guys that
yes, no, no, no.
everybody
Slick
who
Rick.
comes after him takes from.
I think Rakim and Slick Rick are probably the guys that people have imitated and taken the most from, song wise and style wise,
Yeah.
and just in borrowing lines
Hmm.
wise too. Like, yeah, the reverence is there probably most for those guys, those two specifically.
And we've talked off camera too about um one of the things that connects them too is that Nas does. I mean, Nas does have hooks in his songs, but his songs are about the stories mostly. Like they're about storytelling, and
Yeah,
that's another connection between the two of them too.
I think I think for even for outcasts who are storytelling rappers, I
Hmm.
think as well. Well, I mean, there's a reason that. How about this? There's a reason that when Slick Rick got out of jail and he released the Art of Storytelling, the album. Well,
Hmm.
Outkast was on there, Nas was on there, Raekwon from Wu Tang was on there. Well, those are all storytellers
Right.
and high level storytellers in
Oh
their
yeah.
prime.
Some of the
Slick Rick.
best.
Right. Well, this is 1998 when he's dropping this album. So 98, 99, it's like, well, who are your best storytellers? It's like, well, Outkast, Nas, Raekwon. It's like, no, the best storyteller ever went and got the best storytellers. You know what I
So he
mean?
knows what he knows what he's listening to too.
He knows what he's listening to. He knows who he pairs up with, and he knows who he's influenced too.
Yeah. And then to pull this again together, I mean, to come back to the once upon a time, that's like the beginning of a fairy tale, right? That's the beginning of a children's story, even, which is how he starts the thing. Um, and he does have an inversion from typical fairy tales in here, though. He had because most of the time, fairy tales, and I'm familiar with this because I have little kids and I read them all the time. They start, once upon a time, a long, long time ago, there lived a right, and his story is once upon a time, not long ago. He's taking that structure and putting it in like an immediate um, present tense kind of thing. And it's jarring that it's set up as a children's story because I mean, I guess it works just like other fairy tales do. It's meant to scare you a little bit, like it's meant to um, keep you from doing something that you shouldn't be doing.
You know, one of the things that's striking to me about it is just the story as a whole is that it was that listen, okay, so this is still around a fun time for hip hop, okay?
Hmm.
And he's a fun rapper, okay?
Yeah,
His first single is very, very unfun.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And so one of the insightful things for me is that like he obviously has a message because I think like if you listen to the greatest adventures of Slick Rick, you hear the guy that made Lottie Dottie in the show, and it's like that fun, you know, happy go. But you hear a guy like on stories like this and on Hey Young World, who I think is watching his environment change a little
hmm,
bit, and he doesn't necessarily love it, and he's trying to speak to it the best way that he knows how.
okay,
And it just so happens that he's got the entertainment value level and lyrical skill to pull it off because
mm,
Hey Young World and Children's Stories are two of rap's best songs, but they're also two of rap's best messages. I told you this is where Nas got The World Is Yours from. Hey Young World, the
mm,
world is yours. Hey Young World, the
okay,
world is yours. So it's like he's seeing things and he's expressing things on a level, but he's just better at making it entertaining. And that's what I try to take away from what he tried to do with it. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like, like stay away from this, but I'm gonna make it fun because I feel like we got to talk about it. So it's a
yeah.
cautionary tale more than anything else, I think.
Um, I may be misreading this, but one of the last things I wrote about this was the song strikes me as kind of like a double-edged parable. Like it strikes me like to a wider audience, like if I were hearing the song if I were in high school in 1988 or whatever, or 89 or whenever it was released, um, I would hear this, and he says that it's explicit. He says explicitly, like, um, about gateway crimes and staying on the straight and narrow. He says I would have heard it like that at that time, um, but I'm not sure that there's not a layer in here too, unless I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but like a layer in here too about how dangerous the police are in some communities too. Like I hear that a little
Oh,
bit
you
too.
want to know what? That's striking. Let's go there. What's the lyrics that made you provoke
Um,
to
so there's lots of them. Like,
I, I conveniently skipped over that. I think it's very insightful by you.
and
That's fine.
that's one of the what reasons I connected the two songs too. But um, like I've heard most adult black men, particularly, and mothers too, actually say that they give their kids conversations about police and how to interact with police officers, and not that it's dangerous necessarily, but that we worry about staying alive first, and then work the rest of the stuff out on the back end. Um, but the narrator of the song, or not the narrator, but the kid who's committed the crimes in the song, um, is running from the police, who are chasing him originally for trying to rob a undercover police officer.
Hmm.
And then after that, he runs away, and he holds a gun on at least two different
Okay,
other people. But at the end of the story, he gets shot, right? Am I mishearing
right,
that?
right. See,
But he's also surrendered at that point too.
see, okay. So this is what I mean. Okay, so let's unpack it. Originally, you have to understand. Well, let's address it from writer's perspective. He's expressing two kids growing up
Hmm.
in dire but peaceful
Okay.
circumstances, but they're obviously impoverished because one of them has an idea to get some money.
Right.
And so in the process of this, he's finding out that his friend who he's kind of put on to doing this is like, got a mental health issue and is almost like addicted to this and now can't stop.
Hmm.
And so now he's doing this illegal activity all the time. Well, it finally catches up to him. He tries to stick up an undercover cop. But listen to how it goes. The cop grabbed his arm. He started acting erratic, not the cop. The cop grabbed his
Yeah.
arm. He's erratic. And this is what the cop said. He said, "Keep still, boy. No need for static." Now, what was the kid's response? Hold on. So listen to what he's saying. So that's how a cop is framing it to get him to calm down, right?
Right.
So now he's got him calm. And then what does the cop do? Punch him in the belly and he gave him a slap.
Yeah.
So he's speaking to the police brutality right there. So good
Right.
call by you. And also, I want to clarify something. This is the second single off The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick.
Okay.
And Teenage Love was the first single, but this was the biggest single, and it was released April of 1989. So,
Okay.
but it was recorded in 88. So around that 88,
Right.
89 time. I
Cool.
just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, so he's speaking to being like, like I don't know what's worse, the disarming of the young black man to get him to calm down in that moment. Because
Hmm.
keep in mind, he's still calming down somebody who has committed a crime.
Yeah.
But now he knows. See, and this is the thing with the police. See, the police too often, when it comes to young black men, when a young black man is caught for committing a crime, well, they whoop his ass just because they know they can.
Hmm.
That's like one
There's
of
some
the
escalation there. Yeah.
well, what I'm saying is that he's a criminal, so I'm gonna treat a criminal like what I'm saying. And
Okay.
one of those things is to be physically abusive. So the physical abuse by the police force, and that's real. So how would you unpack that? Like what would you say to that? Like, is he as a writer, using a narrative to explain the story? Or is he really just explaining how things really are so that you understand how things really are? Like, is there really a message with that? Or is he really just trying to explain that this is everyday life? Because I'm telling you, that's not uncommon, especially from what I've heard from friends of mine who have grown up in New York City, for you to get held up
I
by the
think
cops.
it's
abusively? Like,
I
is he
think I
trying to hide that, or is that just part of his life and his environment that he's sharing? Like, we have to be careful not to overstate it too, because as
yeah.
much as people don't want to admit it, it's a problem, but also a part of life. Like, I've heard so many New York rappers, some, oh yeah, cops have kicked my ass.
I don't know the answer to that. Like I think it's probably some of both. Like I think
Yeah.
it's part of the story. I mean, it's like
Well, this is what I
and
mean.
like any other fairy tales, there are witches in the woods. Like
Like, there has to
it's
be
just a thing.
protagonist, antagonistic things going on,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
And so part of me feels like, well, this is necessary writing as well to tell this type of dire story.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your point is to show how a kid's going down the wrong path, it's like, well, somebody has to play the protagonist of sorts to the antagonist, or
Yeah,
you have to decide who's your protagonist and antagonist in this story. That's what I mean. It's like,
yeah,
well, I'm the protagonist, or is he the antagonist? Because for me, just off the theme, it's like the kid's the antagonist and the police are the protagonist, but it's like one of those flawed character things on both
mm-hmm.
sides.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm necessary. After he goes punch him in the belly and he gave him a slap, but little did he know the little boy was
Strap.
strapped. And so it's like, no, that's more brilliant writing to me. You get what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
Yeah.
And so some of both, and there might be a message in there. It's like, I hear the genius in the writing because of what happens right after. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, that's him as a writer flexing his muscle.
Right.
In my, it's like, oh, cops got him. No, he doesn't. It's like, haha, we still got more story to tell you.
Yeah.
That's like,
Yeah,
you
because
know,
that could have been the end of the story right there.
right, right. But listen, but this is what I mean. He gives the characters life. The kid pulled out a gun. He said, "Why'd you hit me?" You
Yeah.
know,
Which is a
that's
very kid thing to say. Like it's
right. It says the barrel was set straight for the cop's kidney. The cop got scared. The kitty starts to figure, I'll do years if I pull this trigger. So he's letting you know. So think about it. He's giving you like some emotions from the character that's getting into a
mhm.
tussle with this cop. Why'd you hit me? And he's about to shoot him, but then he's thinking, no, I'm going to jail for a long, long time, like past robbery if I shoot this cop. And
Yeah,
that's when he runs.
right.
So for me, it's like all of that is more great writing. You need that cop there to happen, whether you're trying to deliver
Well,
a message.
and the cool thing to me is that in lots of stories like this in the wider culture, like in the TV show Cops and those kind of stories that you in Law and Order and all that, you don't see as much of the internal monologue of the the kid or the I don't want to call him a criminal. I mean, I'm going to use quote fingers here, criminal. One of the marks of a good storyteller is that there are no perfect characters and no pure evil characters, right? And
Mhm.
all of the characters in this story have good things about them and demons, right? I mean, they're all of them do bad things and all of them do less bad things too.
Mhm. But I think part of what he's sharing with all these interactions, this is what I mean, these things are necessary. The overall message is don't get caught up in these things because what he's
Right.
saying is we're getting caught up in illegal crimes gets you caught up with the police. And then you have to do nefarious things like get getting shotguns from dope fiends
Yeah.
and and hold pregnant women hostage. You get
Hmm.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's expressing to you through the pattern of this. This is actually literally a kid whose life literally spirals out of control in one fell swoop because of things that he's done. And so there's also the case of what goes around comes around catching up to you, and it caught up to him literally extremely fast in the form of one interaction with the undercover cop that turned
And then
into
it
a
just
hostage.
was gone. Yeah.
Yeah, just like that, he's out of our lives. And so that's why I'm saying like these characters and these things are here to make you get that overall message, which is
Hmm.
straight and narrow, or your soul gets cast.
Yep.
Good night.
Good night. It's not funny, right? No,
Right.
like, and to come back around to what I was saying before too, like I love the dope fiend who got him a shotgun. I love that character in the story
Mm-hmm.
because as like an illustration to um we think of in the wider culture as the police force as being protecting and serving or whatever. In this story, the dope fiend with the sawed-off shotgun is a whole lot less dangerous to the not I don't want to call him the protagonist um
The
the
main
main
character.
character in the story than the police officers are. Like he's not dangerous to him at all. Like, and
Right.
this is
So
like the height of the crack epidemic kind of thing. So you're that's the kind of person, like a crackhead in the top of a building with a sawed-off shotgun. Like that's the
New Jack City.
fever, it's the fever dream of the worst possible whatever, right? And he is not dangerous to this character at all.
See, now I think if you want to talk about the police officer, and if you want to compare it to the dope fiend character,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a more valid message that he's trying to convey. You know, in the story, I think the point that he's trying to make that in this life and in this lifestyle, you'll find yourself being more comfortable around a dope fiend
Mm-hmm.
in a out abandoned building than you will in the safety of the police, quote unquote. So that right there, I
Yeah.
think, is a an indictment on the crack epidemic, our police brutality and inability to connect with the inner city community.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of that right there together in the way that the main character displays his emotions. Like, look at
Mm-hmm.
how he is with the cop. It's very combative. It's very
Mm-hmm.
standoffish. Well, that's very real. Look at where he is with the dope fiend. It's like, well, he's used to these dire circumstances in this inner
Right.
city, so he knows exactly what dope fiend, and he knows where he needs to go do where to go to get this shotgun. You understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like that's the striking part to me. Is that it's all falling apart, and it's like a dope fiend has to save him to help get him out the trouble, not the police. It's like
Yeah.
that he's showing the sad state of affairs for us as black men about where we go in dire circumstances because we can't go to the police because the police will punch us and slap us.
Yeah.
You know, they take us into custody the right way. So we'd rather
Right.
run than even deal with like getting incarcerated by the police, even if we're wrong for a crime. That's the message
Yeah.
from the character behavior. Because think about it, towards the end of the story, and then we'll kind of get into the Johnny Cash.
Mm-hmm.
The story, think about it. He says, ran out of bullets and he still had static. Grabbed the pregnant lady and pulled out the automatic. Pointed at her head, he said, the gun is full of lead. He told the cops, back off. Honey here's dead. Deep in his heart, he knew he was wrong. So he lets the lady go and he starts to run on. Siren sounded, they seemed astounded, and before long, a little boy got surrounded. He dropped the gun, so went the glory. And this is the way I have to end this story. He was only 17 in a madman's dream. The cops shot the kid. I still hear him scream.
Right.
Now, here's what people have to understand when he's saying that. That's not necessarily police brutality if you understand the use of force continuum.
Right.
Now, he has already pulled the gun out on police.
Twice. Well, once, sort of, but yeah.
Once. Well, let's go in order.
And then
He's
on somebody else too, but yes.
Pulled the gun out on the police once, then fled the scene,
Mm-hmm.
okay, of the crime and of the attempted assault on the police, you know?
Yeah.
Now he's stolen a car
And crashed it.
and crashed the car.
Yeah.
And now taking somebody hostage and threatened them verbally and physically with the gun as well. That is an escalation of the reasonable use of force continuum from the police to open fire.
Yeah. But that's not when they opened fire.
And that's the part. They open fire when they see him run. And that to me is like, well, if you want to say he's trying to do something with that part, we can unpack that all day. I don't know. But that is the only part of the song where the connectivity of it doesn't make sense. Or maybe he is trying to highlight police brutality because from a literary sense, they're supposed to shoot him after he lets the lady go. You know what I'm saying? They probably should already have people in position to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what
like
do you think?
The things that strike me in the story that you just, or his story, and the way you just described it, as you repeated the lyrics back, they he says more than once. He calls him a little boy. He calls him, what is it? A kid. He's talking about him being young multiple times in the context of a children's story. That's one thing. And the thing that's most jarring to me as a I don't think the story is about or was intended to be about police brutality necessarily, but
Right.
in just the sense, but it's there because it's just part of the kid or the part of their lives.
Hmm.
Um, but like you said about the escalation of force or whatever use of force, like there are several points in this story where I mean I don't ever want to advocate for shooting anybody, but like you would understand like if that was the result.
They they had other opportunities as police
Like
officers.
if he's like
So,
standing there holding a gun to a pregnant woman's head, like you there's not many people that would be like, I mean, yeah, you probably you should try to find a way around that. But like, if something happens at that point, you're like, okay, like
right.
you kind of understand. But they don't shoot him then. They shoot him like when he's like, I don't know if he surrendered or run there, but like he says he drops the gun though. Like so
Right.
he's not.
See, here's what's important about some of the characterization. This is what I mean. Well, he gives the character some life with some words. The kid pulled out a gun. He said, "Why'd you hit me?" Barrel pointed straight for the cop's kidney. The cop got scared. The kid, he starts to figure, I'll do years if I pull this trigger. The kid's not stupid.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? The
And
kid's
and
not
he
just
does it again when he's holding the gun to the pregnant woman too.
right. So
Like
so
I
so
shouldn't do
Slick,
this.
so Slick Rick is giving the character conscience. Okay.
Yeah.
Now on the other side of that, and this is what I mean about it being a story. Well, the police aren't seeing that stream of consciousness.
No, they
They're
don't see
seeing
that part of the story.
they don't see that part of the story. They don't see the stream of consciousness and that he has a soul and that he has a life and that he's down the wrong path and this is all happening too fast for him and this is way too much for him and he's too young. You get
Hmm.
it? They
Yep.
don't see that. They see a kid who tried to rob an undercover cop that's on the run from the police that now is taking a pregnant woman hostage. That's the beautiful thing about this story. I mean, he's masterful. It's like, oh no,
Hmm.
he's telling the story from both sides. It's like
Yep.
the character, the soul, even though he's wrong, the police are doing wrong, even though they're kind of doing what they're supposed to do in their job. And this is what I mean. And you said this, and this is what I mean. Some of the karma part about it is like me as a black man. I mean, realistically speaking, well, I'm surprised he even made it to that part of the story before getting shot. You know what I'm saying? Like in reality, Andrew, he gets shot by the cops much sooner than he gets shot, and that's what I mean.
When he
It's like,
pulls the
well,
gun on him the first time and the yeah.
it's over right there in real life, Andrew. And so,
Hmm.
like, to say that he's trying to highlight police brutality, it's like, I don't know. But what I will tell you is that in those circumstances, even if all of that is true and played out, I would not be surprised if the cop shot the kid the same way. I mean, look at what we've witnessed on film. You know, don't tell me that it's like, oh, well, that it wouldn't happen that way too, because it kind of has now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
There've been
The reason I would say it wouldn't happen that way is because it would have happened earlier. It
sooner,
wouldn't
correct?
have ever made it to that point.
That's what I mean. And so
Yeah.
I think Slick Rick is intelligent enough to know that too. And so that's why I'm saying I don't think he's trying to highlight police brutality. I think it
Hmm.
comes with the territory for the
Okay.
format for the story that he chose to write in. It's one of those things that's going to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the story, uh, you're saying the moral of the story is his last line, right? That you stay on the straight and narrow, or
Yeah. This ain't funny, but so don't you dare laugh. Just another case about the wrong path. Straight and narrow, or your soul gets cast. That's literally a scripture.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the connection that I see, I mean, the initial connection that I saw between the two songs as a segue is that the Folsom Prison Blues is about gun violence too, or what, or at least alludes to it too, right? Like I mean, the second verse is one of the coldest verses in any song that's ever been written by a human being. Like when I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy. Don't never play with guns, but I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. And like that's
That's okay. So when I heard that, I'm thinking that's why. So that line right there, I just shot a man in Reno to watch him die. I'm thinking, what year is this? Because that's some Bugsy Siegel, the mafia is still running type of stuff.
early 50s, yeah.
And so when you said early 50s, I was like, oh, okay, yep. Look,
Mhm.
that makes sense. And so
Yeah.
I think the first thing that, I'm connecting even to the song is that I was like thinking to myself, I was like, but the Reno thing, I'm like, what made him as a writer pick Reno? And it's like, well, he's been, that's that time in Vegas,
I
you
mean, there's
know.
some Wild West in there too, right? I mean, it's that kind of
I mean, but that's Reno in the 50s. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
We know who's running that town.
Hmm.
You know, Right. You know, one thing that I realize is that I feel like I'm not certain of this. I can tell even the hip hop influence of Johnny Cash. Like I can, like when I was listening to his records, I was thinking about when Method Man had this bar and he was like, Johnny Blaze out to get loot like Johnny Cash, play a game of Russian roulette and have a blast. And it's like after like listening to Johnny Cash, it's like no, I can see where Method Man like got that line from.
Hmm.
He has a lot. You know what he has? He has rock star voice and rock star authority, but maybe not rock star looks. And I think that might have something to do with it, actually. But everything about him says that he's like a star and that he's funky. And I think this is one of those, especially for the time that you're highlighting, this is one of those. Well, the legend of this man is kind of built on a song like this. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he has several songs that are
Like,
of
what was
this.
his biggest? Like, did he have a big hit before this record?
Don't hold me to that, but I think Ring of Fire was before this.
Okay.
Maybe Walk the Line might have been before it too. Um, they I don't know the order of the discography. I mean, those are all older songs. So Walk the Line, Ring of Fire, Folsom Prison.
I was struck by the heartless nature with which he sings with
Yeah.
on this record. It's
It's,
like he's chilling, like like he. I'm assuming he wrote most of his stuff.
mhm.
He knows his voice very well.
Yeah.
Like he writes to the strength of what his voice
Yeah.
does, and so he does the painful and the somber and the
Yeah.
cold, like beautiful. Is that a
Yeah.
fair?
Yeah. And he did that his whole life too. I mean,
And so he appeared. Is he? So he appeared to like really be like a. Is he really like a dark figure in like a dark soul? Because like you like think about this. Like this is 1953. He's talking about shooting a man in Reno and killing him for no reason. You know what I'm saying?
mhm.
And like you know the whole whistleblower line. I was like, is that where whistleblower comes from? Because you have to think about how early this is. It's like
Yeah.
when he hears whistleblower. I think about
I don't
stuff.
know that it comes from that. I don't, it may very well may, but I mean, he's talking about the whistle on the train. There's lots of motifs in older folk music that come before this about trains and prisons and stuff like that, and he's kind of smashing them together. Um, there's not many of them being told from the inside of prison, but it, it's. I mean, they called him the Man in Black. Like he dressed all in black for his
Yeah.
concerts and stuff like that. And he leaned into the outlaw persona um, a lot. Um, and a lot of his contemporaries through the 60s and 70s um, were the Glenn Campbells of the world, people who wore like those really bright rhinestone suits and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And he went completely the other direction. So, and his songs, generally speaking, um, are darker than a
Yes.
lot of most of his songs are darker, not just this one. And they, I mean, country music comes from the blues, right, and folk music. So it a lot of those thematic things, like in Hank Williams and that kind of "I'm so lonesome I could cry" and all that kind of stuff. Those are
Mm-hmm.
darker too, but they're not dark like this. And I mean, we the like another generation was introduced to him in like the early 2000s when he covered Nine Inch Nails song "Hurt." And hearing him sing that as like an 80-year-old man, I hurt myself today, and to see if I still feel, I focus on the pain, the old familiar sting, try to kill it all away. Like that, hearing that from a man in his 70s, singing "You Could Have It All, My Empire of Dirt," like I mean, just saying the words out loud gives me chills on the arm. Like it's, and he does that like throughout his career.
I have a question. So Folsom Prison is a real prison.
Folsom Prison is in California. Yes, it really exists.
Okay. And so he's hearing the train from Folsom.
Yeah,
It's
he's
headed toward
the
San Antonio.
story is the setup of the story is he's inside the prison cell and he can hear the train going by, and it
Right.
kind of represents freedom for him, right? Like because it's
Yeah.
going on
So
away
so
from
he
there.
in San Antonio or San Antone has like a just
That's a place far away. Yeah.
a place far away. And see, he's just in his mind, he's like, that's where it's headed because he wants to get away from where he is. This is very that you know what this is?
Mm,
This is very like DMX like storytelling is
okay.
really like a takeaway. And even after listening to his music, it's very like it's mood music, but it's high level mood music. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not your normal hit record.
No.
Like it's a hit and you know that it's a hit and
Hmm.
you can tell, but it's not a normal hit. And the only comparison I could think of to Johnny Cash would be DMX to that. Like
Yeah.
when you
DMX's music in my head is really dark too. Like,
correct. And so I was trying to find the artist that I could compare to him the most,
hmm.
like hip hop wise, and DMX was who I
Okay.
really with the most. And so I hear a lot of DMX like in this song. It's just DMX speaks from that aggressive tortured place,
Hmm.
and Johnny Cash speaks from that somber tortured place.
Hmm.
But the tortured soul, I think,
Yeah.
most around the music is there because even in his love songs, you know, or what's supposed to be love songs, all his love songs really turn out bad. You know that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it starts off as a love song and then it doesn't.
Yeah. One of his most famous ones is called Jackson, which is um just a bit of his personal history. He was married early in life and met June Carter, who was also a member of a country music group too, with a Carter family. And they went or sort of on tour together, and he was like obsessed with this woman, and he essentially left his wife to be with her. Um, and so the song Jackson is about Jackson, the Jackson is Jackson, Mississippi, like the riverboat gambling kind of place.
Mhm.
There's lots of gambling kind of references, Reno being, another one, in his songs. But um, the song of Jackson is um, him and June both singing, where he does a verse and then she does, and then he does, and she does. They're kind of responding to each other, and he's basically saying like, it's clear that they're married or they're together, like the characters in the song, not just the John and June. But the they he says first, like, I'm going to Jackson, I'm going to mess around. And by mess around, I don't think he means women. I think he means like
Campbell.
gambling and
Yeah.
doing drugs and stuff. But
Right.
he was a serious alcoholic. He was a serious like on pills like amphetamines, barbiturate kind of stuff, uppers, downers, whatever, for
Okay.
most of his adult life until like through the 70s. But
Tomorrow.
um, and then she says, and then the second verse is like, "Go on, see if I care." I mean, it's not a real story, but it's another toxic kind of love song. Like, screw you, screw you. I'm going. Okay, fine, go. I don't care. Like, it's that kind
Yeah.
of.
He always talks about the woman that he loved being with another man.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And that's a country and blues tradition too. I mean,
it
that's a
is. He expresses the insecurity well though, because there's
yeah.
something about insecurity that's still masculine, and that's what I mean. He's very DMX like. Because like DMX is arguably our most vulnerable and insecure figure since Tupac, but he's looked at as such a man and so
Hmm.
masculine
It
still.
was very
You know?
macho. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Johnny Cash has that same kind of effect because it's like even when you hear him talking about how he may not even be man enough to keep his woman, he still sounds like he's more of a man than
No,
you.
he's got that voice, man. Like the voice
Yeah,
is his voice is like the Chuck D voice. I mean, he has that huge bass voice
yeah,
that could sing like over, screaming prison inmates, like in not screaming, but like shouting. And
right.
because if you listen, go back and listen, there's I think it's live from Folsom Prison actually. Like, um, and the song comes way before that, but um, he played a show there, and you hear like you can hear the inmates like shouting in the background.
Now I will tell you this: I love the songwriting. I think more than I love the song, but I think that's a time thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why I
Hmm.
was asking if the song got made too, because it's like, and I played it over and over and over again. Because like for me, when I haven't heard something,
Hmm.
I want to get lost into it until the point that my mind starts just picking it up. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Sure.
So when I'm hearing his imagery and how he's writing this song, it's like I can see a man it's the tortured soul inside of the prison cell. He's mad at all the rich people that get to do what they want.
Hmm.
He hears the train and imagine where it goes. It's it's that it's prison
He's here.
blues.
He's hearing it go by every day, just
Right.
like, and I mean, his wish at the end of the song is that not that. I mean, if he said if they free me from this prison, but
And
but the wish really is not about getting out of prison. The wish is I want to move this train track somewhere else where I don't have to hear it anymore.
well,
And it
that
doesn't make me have to think about it anymore.
well, can I tell you something? The train is one of the things that timestamps it. It made me ask you how old it was too. Because
Hmm.
I'm thinking like, okay, he's hearing the train
Yeah.
like from the prison. It's like World War II, maybe? Ah, yes, World War II,
Yeah.
right after. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, like, it time dates some of the some of the lyrics and some of the perspective too. And that's why I mean, oh, this feels like an old hit record, and
Hmm.
it is an old hit record. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I would consider anything before 1960,
Yeah.
1960,
Yeah.
like to be old. Like
Yeah.
in terms, like if that's not what we consider the modern popular culture music sound, even
Right.
from like or the black side.
No. 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 We generally think of. I mean, people either think of modern music as starting with Elvis or the Beatles, like that. Those are like the time as far as time goes.
Right.
In
And
Elvis's mid 50s and
right.
his
Well,
rise, and the Beatles are 61, 62, 63.
right. And Elvis is literally a couple of years older. I
Yeah.
mean, younger than Johnny Cash. Like Johnny Cash, I looked it up.
Yeah.
Elvis was born in 35. Johnny Cash was born in 32. So they're all around my grandfather's age. My
Hmm.
grandfather was born in 29, and that's what I mean. That's a different time and a different era, and even a different way of thinking about the music. I know you've been on a little bit of the Isley Brothers kick because you
Yeah.
sent me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll look at it.
You've
Shot by
taught
the
me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, Shout by the Isley Brothers is like 1958
Okay.
ish. And so even listen to them on Shout and then go listen to them in 1960. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
The music changed. And so I think one of the most striking things about Johnny Cash that I can say from listening to his music is that he transitioned his sound into a new era as well as anybody that I can think of from that era
Yeah.
because he appears to be like last of a dying breed in that regard. And it appears to
Yeah.
outlasted most of his contemporaries that came after him too.
He did. He was in like in the 70s, 80s, was also in a musical group called the Highwaymen, and they that was Waylon Jennings and him and Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson, and all of whom were like, have you heard the phrase outlaw country? That's where it comes from. It's from them.
Okay, you want to know what's crazy? Is I know every last one of those names, but outside of Willie Nelson, not familiar with the music. But
Hmm.
maybe I need to get
Um,
acquainted. I know all of
Christopherson is one of my favorite songwriters in the world. He is, um, he is, he's the one who you would be familiar with some of it. Like Me and Bobby McGee, that Janis Joplin made famous. He wrote that
yeah.
song. Um,
Okay,
he is one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century, I think. Like, and we'll do a whole nother episode about Christopherson.
okay. I was about to say I would.
He's
I
good
mean,
too.
I don't know how you do when we do these song comparisons,
Hmm.
comparing contrast. But one thing that I try to do is like listen to the artist beyond the one song that we
Yeah,
listen to.
me too.
Actually like get immersed in the catalog and see like some of the stuff because some of the stuff I can get with and like I end up adding to my playlist. Like I have to be honest with you, I like Johnny Cash and I respect Johnny Cash.
Hmm.
It's just a little bit too dated for me, sound and style wise. It's not
Hmm.
what I'm looking for. But
Sure.
like some of the other stuff like I've gotten into, and even with that, it's like well, it's taught me to respect all ways of songwriting and music and styles and where people coming from and how they explain it, and
Yeah.
that's what I think about what we do here, at
Yeah,
least
and
in my.
it works about the other way too. Like the Slick Rick song is not a song that I would pick up normally. Like it doesn't have many of the things that are initially attract me to songs or that would make me listen to it multiple times. So but I've listened to the song 50 times now since because we paired this like 6 or 8 months ago or whatever,
Right.
and so I've listened to it a bunch of times since then, and it grows on you. Like
Yes.
you hear things that are you can hear the things that are good about it, even if it's not like your favorite, right?
Right.
Like you can respect the craft of it, even if it's not your most favorite thing.
Well, sound wise, it's so unique for
Hmm.
what else you're hearing at the time. Like, I mean, you're hearing KRS-One and Chuck
Yeah.
D and Rakim and Ice Cube and now a young Scarface. These are guys with heavy, deep, booming,
Hmm.
powerful voices. And so I would encourage you to listen to The Greatest Adventures of Slick
Okay.
Rick. It is the best storytelling on one album still in hip hop history. Like, I think Nas and Scarface and Ghostface
Hmm.
have passed Slick Rick as a storyteller,
Okay.
but there isn't one album that has a better collection of stories than The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick.
Wow. And that's
Every song is like 12 songs, and every song is literally a story. And it's some of the best rap stuff ever. The
mhm.
Moment I Feared is the end the moment I feared and Indian Girl
Hmm.
are two of rap's funniest endings to a song ever. Treat Her Like a Prostitute might be hip hop's funniest, raunchiest song about relationships ever.
Mm.
Children's Story, it might be rap's greatest story. Mona Lisa,
Mona Lisa is a great song. You
Mona,
put me on that one too. That one's good.
man, Mona Lisa, and I mean, like, these are top 50 rap songs, Mona Lisa and Children's Story.
Hmm.
The gem of the album is Hey Young World, which I was referencing
Right.
earlier. Like, Teenage Love is on there. There's all sorts of classic stuff on The Greatest Adventures of Slip Rick. It's a phenomenal album. The way that you were telling me I needed to go listen to like some more Bob Dylan stuff,
Hmm.
it's like that's the way I would encourage you to listen to The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick. It's like
Okay.
on that level. It's like, no, no, no. That's something that like if you want to understand this a little better, you probably should listen to it more.
Okay.
You know, because that's like, that I've listened to the Beatles stuff and I'm more
Right.
acquainted with the Beatles stuff. And you were like, oh, if you don't know Dylan, like you need to check his stuff out. You
Right.
like it, like Slick Rick. Because I know how you are as a writer.
Hmm.
The way Slick Rick puts stuff together, it's hard for writers not to like him.
Okay. Cool.
Even
Yeah.
though the material is like X-rated and raunchy at times, like the writing is just so brilliant. It's
Yeah.
hard to deny. Yeah.
Uh, to pull this together also again in another kind of way, we have talked about, um, and you've talked about on According to Hip Hop too, that Nas being the only one who has classic albums that are being published like 30 years after he came out with his original one, and Cash is another one. Like he's the only other one that I know that has classic albums. I mean, there are people who have classic songs. There are people who have one classic album. There are people who do it 20 years later or 23.
Mm-hmm.
But that far into their and Cash's, I mean, the American series was in the 1990s and early 2000s. Like so, that was like 40, almost 50 years in some cases after. Um, is and there's not that's basically the whole. And I mean, Dylan has one basically. I mean, I had gotten into an argument on with one of the According to Hip Hop people or somebody who had commented on one that about Time Out of Mind, which is his like Dylan's classic album, like in the I think in the 90s. And it
Only
is an
years,
excellent it's an excellent record, but he doesn't have several like
and it's only like 20 years from his last classic though, too.
yeah.
Not a 30-year gap.
Yeah. Um so if you don't like the not don't like would not choose to ordinarily listen to the that kind of music, like the 1950s Folsom Prison Blues kind of stuff, go listen to I like American 3 and 4,
Okay.
that are one's called Solitary Man and I forget what the American 4 is called. um but these are albums that they're largely covers, but they also have original songs on them too, that are um, dramatic. They're covers, but they're dramatic reimaginings of songs too. And they were as a hip hop connection too. They're also produced by Rick Rubin. Um, the later
Oh, well, that's funny. The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick. This stuff like came off of Def Jam.
no, I did not know that, but so
Yeah.
that's another connection between the two of them.
Yeah.
We talked about "I Won't Back Down" actually as a Tom Petty song. Cash covers that as that's one of the songs he
I
covers.
love Won't Back Down.
He
Yeah.
covers U2's song "One." He covers Nine Inch Nails' "Hurt." Depeche Mode's "Personal Jesus."
Okay.
there are lots of songs. There are probably lots of songs on there that you recognize as
Okay.
covers.
No,
Um,
no, no.
and
For
and the feel of it's very different. I mean, it is still very somber. I mean, he's a dark soul for sure, not like in an evil way, but in a
just
somber
who he is.
way.
Right. Yeah, it's
And
just who he is.
so um, those are that's lots of dots to connect.
I was actually thinking, the first thing that I think that you should do is go listen to the Ruler's Back on the Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick,
Okay.
and then go listen to the Ruler's Black Back that starts off the Blueprint by Jay-Z, and just look at how much he just like took the whole song.
Okay.
He took the whole song, even the horns, even
Okay.
not here for the taken. So like I just want you to see, because that's a great indicator of how heavy Slick Rick's influence is. It's like you can go listen to a record
Mm-hmm.
that Slick Rick made in 1988
Mm-hmm.
and listen to how it influenced Jay-Z 13 years later on what a lot of people regard to be his best album, or at least second best album.
Okay. Cool. I look forward to doing that. That'll be fun.
Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna check out some maybe more modernized Johnny Cash
Yeah.
today.
It's good stuff. It really is. I mean,
No, 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 I don't doubt it. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. It's funny. It's like, and I keep this in mind too, and I'm pretty sure you do too. It's like, well, you're not going to send me any bad songs to listen to.
right. Right.
This song's terrible. We should talk about it.
No. I mean, we will have to do like, I don't know, some like guilty pleasure cheese ball whatever episodes eventually with, because there's obviously lots of those too. But
Well, I think you've been on a little Isley Brothers kick the way I kick on the Rolling Stones sometimes. I was thinking about a little Isley Brothers, maybe Rolling Stone pairing
we
just
can
for
do
fun.
that. We can do
Yeah. Like I thought your observation. Hold on. What song was that you sent me?
Is don't something. Hold on.
Don't say goodnight.
Yeah, yeah.
When you said Al Green's whole style is based off this song, I was like, my head exploded inside. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, Andrew's right. I'm like, this is Al Green's whole steez right here.
It's the whole. Every Al Green song is that song. Like,
No, you're right. When you said that, I was like, oh shit. I'm like, Andrew's right. I was like, every Al Green song is "Don't Say Goodnight" by the Isley Brothers. And
even
then
thematically, it is.
and then when you made the Maxwell comparison,
All the falsetto stuff, like all of
oh,
that. D'Angelo too. I mean, like all of
I,
them. Yeah.
I was thinking about Fortunate and like
Mhm.
all that early stuff that Maxwell did, and I was like, oh, I'm like, Andrew's right. I'm like, that's the Isley Brothers, their influence and their
No,
imprint.
the Isleys. I like I said, I found like a playlist on YouTube Music that says like presenting the Isley Brothers. So it plays. It's essentially like a 40 of their greatest hits or whatever, and
Right.
yeah, I could hear it. Like this one is where Boyz II Men and Jodeci got all of their songs. This is where Al Green got all of his songs. This is where Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder got all of their songs. These are the samples for Juicy. This is the sample for, or no, Juicy for One More Chance.
Big
Right.
Papa.
Big Papa. I knew it was one of them. Sorry, I'm embarrassing myself in my hip
Oh,
hop
you're
knowledge.
cool.
But like yeah, I heard that. I mean, here's the one that it was a good day. Here's Curtis Mayfield. Here's P Funk. Here's like all of them are like
I told you that's where I was telling you they're very Beatles like in the
mm-hmm.
sense that their footprints are like all over
Yeah.
everybody else on top of their catalog being like
Right.
masterfully stellar. It's not that just the catalog is stellar. It's like, well, their shit's all over everybody else's shit too. It's like when you were telling, like when we have conversations about 90s popular culture rock bands, you still reference the Beatles.
Yep.
That's why that's where the
Same
Isley,
idea.
it's the same exact thing, because it's like, oh no, while those 90s bands are all borrowing from the Beatles, guess what all the 90s R&B and rappers are doing? Like R&B and the rappers.
Mm-hmm.
Like not the singers. Think about this. They
Yep.
influence the rappers too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you can hear it, and that's what I told you, and that's what I just said too. Like you can hear it, like in every piece of black music that I know that comes after the Isley Brothers, you can hear it in there, or pieces of it in there, especially with male singers, like or male vocalists, for sure. I've listened to a ton of Marvin Gaye and Al Green and Curtis Mayfield and those kind of guys, and the connections are really obvious there.
Right, those connections are in place.
This is where it comes from. Yep.
Yeah, that's a direct line, but it's just the little stuff everywhere. It's like, nope, them two, them two, them
Mm-hmm.
two. Like think about it, Ice Cube, Biggie.
Yep.
Those West Coast, those are rappers.
Mm-hmm.
they're taking the R&B grooves and making them into,
Yep.
because Good Day is Footsteps in the Dark and Big Papa is Between the Sheets.
Hmm.
Well, and I'd like to say, for as great as Big Papa and Good Day are, neither one of them are even touching the original version. Think about
No, no.
what I'm saying. Like Footsteps, as much as I love Ice Cube and I love Good Day, and it's one of Rap's best songs. Oh man, Footsteps in the Dark.
That's a good song, man. And like I didn't know it either. Like I was very
I
embarrassed.
told they got
I
they
listened to it, I was like, oh,
great, isn't
yeah.
it?
This is good
Yeah,
stuff, man. Yeah.
good stuff. Yeah, that's how I feel about the Stones when I be listening. I'll be like, no, this shit's good. I don't care what you say. Good music's good music, man. That's why
Hmm.
we do this.
We'll have to when we get off camera. We'll have to because this is going to cut off in like 3 minutes anyway. We'll have to talk about like which because we can do that next if you want. Do the Isleys and Rolling Stones, unless you want to do something that's more. I don't know.
Um,
Or you want to do Nas to set up for
I'm about to say
next
Nas
week.
is about to drop, so if you want to do a song, you know what I'm saying. I try to think. You want to know what? Probably should have did a Jay-Z song because he celebrated 25 years of Volume One the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we can maybe pick a Jay-Z song if we can get back to it quick enough, and we can maybe pick a Jay-Z song and a Nas song.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm always down for the Isleys Rolling Stones thing. That's like,
Yeah,
oh,
that'd be a lot of fun.
yeah, that's like, what song do you want to pick and talk about? It's like that's really
I don't know. Like, I mean, because both of them have like super deep catalogs. Like, that's
like, are we keeping it simple and doing stuff like "Start Me Up" versus, you know what I'm saying? Like, are we
mm,
keep it simple, or are we gonna like delve like a little deeper into the catalog, like "Voyage to Atlantis," stuff like that? You know what
I'll
I
have
mean?
to. We'll pick an Isley song. You want to do Voyage to Atlantis? Because I will because
I'm trying
like
to
I
think.
know what song you're talking about, but I have to like actually go listen to it closer to.
I want to pick a song that kind of like, you know, where they meet like properly in the middle.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because they're both so big.
Yeah.
Um, but let me think about the song because to be honest with you, like "Footsteps in the Dark"
Hmm.
is my original thought, but I kind of want to pick something funkier that
Yeah.
hasn't
They
been
have
used.
some funky stuff.
That's what I mean. I want to pick something a little bit funkier that maybe hasn't been used as much.
Okay.
Because so much of the stuff with the Isleys, it's like, well, you've heard it again
Yeah.
and again and again to the point that you forget that it's theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's their shit.
Like twist and shout and like those things. Like I didn't know that was who did them originally. Uh,
No, no,
did
no.
did they do twist and shout originally, or was that Little
Yeah,
Richard?
originally theirs. You see,
Okay.
I thought it was actually the Temptations.
Mm. I mean, there's.
And
I mean, the Beatles did a cover of it too. I mean, like everybody in that time period did a cover of that song.
somebody told, I mean, it got bought to me. They're like, cool, like Ronald Isley, like, he's the first one who did shout. I was like, for real? He's like, go look it up. I'm like, okay,
I learned something.
I don't learn something. Yep.
This is
I
about
only
to
know
cut
what
off.
I know what I know because I listen to people who know more than me. You know,
Yeah,
like
that's why we're doing this, right? Like I want to. My initial thing was that I realized I thought as a white guy from my generation or whatever that I knew a bunch about hip hop until I listened to According to Hip Hop, and I was like, I don't know shit. Like so, that's why I like listening to it because I'm learning things, right? Like that's
yeah, no, I get it. And you know how I am. I'm just like a sponge for stuff, and I always
mhm,
have been. And just the process of being able to branch into something else that I love. Like I love music, and so it's like if you're
mhm.
offering me the chance to learn something more about music,